Welcome to the weekend edition of Business Plus. I'm Shweta Kothari. One story that dominated headlines this week is the Zee-Sony merger falling through the cracks. 2 years in making, a series of regulatory challenges, questions on corporate governance raised and answered, a battle for management position and extended deadlines later. But the $10 billion merger stayed on course all through these little ups and downs. A real-life pot boiler, if one may say so, until 22nd of January when Sony decided to finally terminate the deal and slap a $90 million termination fee on Zee Entertainment over an alleged failure to fulfill the merger conditions. Zee Entertainment is contesting that notice, calling it legally untenable. As this story proceeds, another one is haunting Subhash Chandra and his family, the promoters of Zee. The magnitude of corporate governance lapses and siphoning of funds from Zee Entertainment to other promoter-led companies is reportedly to the tune of 800 to 1,000 crore rupees, almost 4 to 5 times the earlier reported number. Even as Zee Entertainment says the stock market regulator SEBI has been acting with a predetermined mind, the investigation could take months. The ongoing saga continues to be filled with drama and twists and turns, not unlike the series the GC behemoth produces. But even as the Zee-Sony chapter ends, at least for now, more questions emerge on how India's media and entertainment landscape is going to evolve and whether it is in favor of content consumers like us. Some of the questions, in fact, we're asking as of this morning is, number one, whether a Reliance Disney deal and can India afford a monopoly in the media and entertainment space? Number two, who is more affected party in the breakup of the Zee-Sony merger, as we've seen becoming and unbecoming of it in the last 2 years? Number three, what options do Zee have to prevent a potential hostile takeover in future? Number four, can Subhash Chandra make a comeback without another partner? And number five, could there be more entrants bidding for Zee? Joining me to discuss the future of Zee and the future of media and entertainment space are my colleagues Sridharan, editor Business Economy International at TV9 Network. Also with me here in the studio is Kartik Malhotra, executive editor TV9. Kartik, let me begin by asking you, and of course this is the mega question that everybody would be pondering over in the course of next couple of months. Is India media and entertainment space heading towards a monopoly?
I think, Shweta, unfortunately, the answer to that right now, given the breakup of the Zee-Sony deal, the deal not going through, seems to be a fairly high probability yes. I wouldn't stick my neck out and say it is going to be a 100% monopoly. No, not for the foreseeable future. But I think it's important to look at the market share and divide that market share by ad revenue, and those numbers become fairly significant and fairly large. So if you look at the market share between all the incumbent players right now, and let's pull up those graphics and see, we've divided that into a pie chart where it is fairly obvious that with Viacom 18, with the Disney Star, which is the operation in India, with Zee, with Sony, all of them together constitute a fairly healthy pie. But if this number was to change, and let me just, hop across to that screen and show you. Right now, we've got Disney Star in talks with Viacom 18. This becomes a sizable 32 plus 11% market share. This market share is straight away now going in the territory of over 40%. Whereas if Zee Entertainment, which has a 16.8% market share as per ad revenue as on end of FY23, plus Sony, it would have taken the combine up to about 26 odd percent. The balance is healthily split at a 30% market share between all incumbent players. Now, what really happens with Disney Star and Viacom 18 coming up, and let's move on to the next graphic and show you, with Disney Star and Viacom 18 coming together, we are looking at 100 plus channels being controlled by that one entity. 100 plus channels, because Disney Star in India has about 77 channels, Viacom 18 has about 38 channels. In addition to that, they are both leaders in their own domains when it comes to OTT. Disney Plus, Hotstar and Jio Cinema is going to give this combined entity 2 large OTT platforms. The two incumbents are also, in fact, fairly well diversified into film production. So with Fox Studios and Viacom Studios coming in, we are looking at two movie studios which are going to be controlled by this combined entity. Let's move on and see what is the kind of revenue that they have been commanding. So the advertising market share, as I showed you, split between them is about 43% for the merged entity. Operating revenue for Disney Star was a little under 20,000 crore rupees in FY23, and for Viacom 18 about 4,500 crore rupees. Let's move on to the next graphic and understand if the Zee-Sony deal would have actually gone through. What is the kind of fillip it would have given that merged entity? Zee Entertainment has about 50 channels, Sony has about 26. Give or take, merge a few channels, shut some programming, we were definitely looking at 70 plus channels. Together, the two of them also command two OTT platforms, ZEE5 and Sony Live, and film studios as well, which is Zee Studio and Sony Pictures. So it is pretty much competitive when it comes to the combination of the Disney Star plus Viacom 18 combined. Let's look at the revenue that they were commanding up until now. Market share, of course, I told you the merged entity would have had about 27%, but operating revenue for Zee Entertainment was about 8,000 crore rupees. And for Sony, a little under 6,700 crore rupees. Now, with this merged entity not coming through, the question really is what happens to this combination of the market share, which could perhaps be grabbed by a much larger incumbent player, which now seems to be the Reliance Industries and Disney Star combined.
All right, and it essentially means that the competition that the merger could have posed is now gone at the face of it. Appears that
seems like for the time being,
Disney and Reliance could be, in fact, the majority player
Absolutely.
in the media and entertainment space in India. But who is essentially more affected by the fallout of that deal? Let me quickly get in my colleague R. Sridharan. Shri, thank you very much for taking time out from all the way in Bengaluru. Who is more affected by the fallout of this merger? That is the question that each of these parties will be asking. Will it be Zee? Will it be Sony at this point? But a lot of news items around Zee looks like all is not going too well.
I think the clear loser with the deal falling through will be Sony, Shweta, because, you know, there is no other asset, a media and entertainment asset like what Zee offers to Sony to catapult its position in the marketplace. So for Zee, let's look at it, from the promoter's point of view and from the business as it is going right now. There is no immediate impact of the deal falling through on the business per se. Of course, shareholders are very angry. They've written to Ministry of Corporate Affairs on the destruction of shareholder value that's happened. But business as an ongoing entity is not going to be affected by the Sony deal falling through. But for the promoters themselves, I think this is also probably a desired situation where the promoting family, Mr. Subhash Chandra, Puneet Goenka, they continue to run Zee with a less than 4% ownership. So it's definitely Sony's loss. Zee will continue to run as a business as long as they're able to keep the eyeballs, because, you know, you were asking Kartik earlier about monopoly. So there are two stakeholders who typically would be affected in a monopolistic situation. One is, of course, the consumers, and second are the advertisers. So eyeballs will stay with you, Shweta, as long as you have great content on your platform, whether it's TV channels or OTT platform, and you know consumers are fickle. And the consumer's interest would be affected only if, let's say, the competition impacts the quality of shows that are coming on their platforms. As far as advertisers are concerned, the rates will go up with a monopoly. But I think in a digital world where there's so many options available, so many different platforms available, it's very easy for the creator economy to move from one platform to another platform. So it's very hard. So people, companies have to fight to maintain their position in the marketplace. So to Kartik's point as well, it's not a given that, this will be a monopoly that gets created. But yes, definitely stronger entities because of the multiple synergies that they will draw. But monopoly is probably going to be a tough one.
All right, monopoly is going to be a tough one. But let's quickly understand firstly with what's happened at Zee at the moment. Who are the majority owners when it comes to Zee? Who are the stakeholders in Zee? Because as I mentioned, a lot of news items that have not been favorable to Zee that have come in, Kartik, in the past couple of hours. Questions raised on corporate governance issues and what can stakeholders do at this point in time to turn around the fortunes for Zee?
Right. So I think Shweta very simply put, and that's exactly what Shri also just mentioned, that the promoters between the father-son duo of Subhash Chandra and Puneet Goenka and the other family members, their ownership in Zee is actually standing at less than 4%, just about 3.99%. As of December 2023, the bulk of the shareholding was actually split between the FIIs and the DIIs. Now, the FIIs, continue to own about 28% or so in the combined entity, whereas the domestic institutional investors, which includes both mutual funds as well as others, is a sizable 43% or so. Now let's look at the split of what this DII holding really is. This DII holding primarily is in the mutual fund space, which is held by ICICI Prudential, which owns about 7.25% of Zee Entertainment, Nippon India Mutual Fund about 6.12%, HDFC Mutual Funds, LIC, both in the range of about 5%, and then you've got the Tata Large and Mid Cap as well as the HDFC Life Insurance owning almost about 2% each. So this is the broad shareholding pattern when it comes to Zee Entertainment as of December 2023. Now, I think the next obvious question that emerges is there a possibility of Sony going hostile? Is there something that the father-son duo at Zee, who together own less than 4%, do to continue keeping some sort of a controlling stake, if not by way of shareholding, then by way of influence and by way of being on the board and running Zee Entertainment as is? Those are questions which right now to my mind are unanswered.
Unanswered, and I think one of the concerns, of course, a lot of people have been also raising on social media is what happens to investors' interest at this point, because as Zee's stocks nosedived, a substantial value was lost for a lot of investors in these mutual
funds. You're
right,
Shweta. So we saw, in fact, on 22nd of Jan, when this news actually finally got confirmed, and we had been speculating, and there were reports which were suggesting that Sony may walk out of the deal. Finally, when the termination notice came on the 22nd of Jan, Zee stocks expectedly, Zee Entertainment nosedived and fell below 30%. In fact, it was down about 33% or so, but it quickly recovered the next day as well. So it means that there is some sort of a value buying that investors are perhaps seeing, and they want to look at this stock because they understand that Zee is a fairly well-entrenched player in the GC space, and one way or another, it is going to continue to be in business. It is, in any case, making enough revenue, decent profits, commands a 26% odd market share for the combined entity, but that aside, about a 16% market share that it continues to command on advertising. It was obviously seen perhaps as some sort of a value purchase, which investors who had sold on news and sold on sentiments picked up on the value of the stock.
Right. But remember, in his last mega public platform appearance, Subhash Chandra spoke to TV9's network MD and CEO Barun Das on News 9 Plus award-winning talk show Duologue with Barun Das, where he seemed to believe that control and ownership is not something that Chandra yearns for. In fact, on a philosophical note, he said that the joy of creation is what keeps him ticking. Listen in.
Somewhere I feel you're both a creator and a destroyer. Like a Lord Shiva and Brahma in one. You created all these businesses, but finally most of the businesses either it has lost out on the way, even the successful one, you've lost control, or you in some other you've lost the leadership. Do you, like you are a creator, it was your own creation, do you also hold yourself responsible some way?
No business which was successful has been destroyed.
Has been taken.
Ownership is a very different thing. The Zee Entertainment Enterprise Limited or Zee Media or Dish TV or City Cable or any of the businesses which I have created will never die.
Not die, but the control you always wanted.
It doesn't matter control. Who's you will never lose. You will never have a control. Ek din to khali haath jana hai. So I am not a control freak.
I am not control freak. That is what Subhash Chandra told TV9 back last year. Shri, it essentially perhaps also gives you an insight into the mind of the maker. He is saying we're not interested in control. Does that possibly mean that there could be a possible entity which could either partner with Zee or could potentially take over Zee in future? Who are the expected partners that we can look at as far as Zee Entertainment is concerned in future?
So, Shweta, there's a rich irony in Mr. Subhash Chandra's statement that he's not hung up on control, because as we now know, it is essentially Puneet Goenka's desire to remain in the saddle even after the merger happens that principally led to the collapse of the deal. Because Sony wanted the entire family, the promoter family, to be out because it was going to acquire more than 50%. And while the family want to remain in the saddle with just 4% ownership of Zee Entertainment. So there is some irony that Mr. Subhash Chandra should speak about that, we are not hung up on control. Uh, so I think that is something, people will have to judge and shareholders will have to look at. But in terms of where does it leave Zee today? I think Zee is now a fair game for anyone with a big check to write. Although the float is only 25%, institutions hold a large chunk, as Kartik walked you through all the details, almost 44%. And institutions, remember, have faced a severe destruction in their value. They have a fiduciary responsibility to protect their investors, especially mutual funds, which is essentially comprises small investors. So they have a duty to protect the wealth of their investors. And if someone came along tomorrow with a check saying that, okay, we want to buy Zee's shares from you, I don't see any reason why the mutual funds should say no, because their duty is ultimately to the shareholder. They have to make sure that the valuation that Sony was willing to offer Zee is obtained and given to their shareholders. So I think this is obviously not the end of the Zee saga. I may even not even rule out Sony coming back to the deal if, let's say, the promoters either voluntarily say, okay, we are going to sell to you, and we are happy to take the back seat and just be shareholders with a 4% ownership. No being in the saddle. Puneet Goenka is not going to be the MD and CEO. Or Sony and other shareholders orchestrate, call an EGM where the chairman, the board, entire board is actually voted out. A new board is brought in, and that facilitates a Sony deal or any other deal.
All right, so of course change is needed and some acceptance from the board as well to make that move to honor their fiduciary responsibility towards investors. But let's also quickly listen into another interesting part of that conversation where Subhash Chandra, in conversation with Barun Das, he said and admitted that his creation of Zee Entertainment has led to suitors vying for Zee, and that a Japanese company like Sony comes with value systems that are unlike its Western counterparts. Take a look.
Why do you think the whole world always would have had his eyes on your businesses? And you have been throttling so many takeover bids. So you first befriended none other than Rupert Murdoch. And then you also stood up against him and said that India is not for sale. So why have people been so much enticed to come and take over your businesses?
Well, लड़की सुंदर होती है तो उसके पीछे बहुत लड़के आते हैं. If you have a successful business, people will want to have that business.
You recently, in this Zee Entertainment, with regard to that, you called me up and said that Barun, Zee ko bachana hai. I mean, I obviously said that quite rightly, that I'm too insignificant for that. But what was the issue? Who were you saving Zee from?
The people, those who wanted to grab the Zee Entertainment.
No, but that's Invesco was coming in between the merger, right?
Invesco and the Invesco's supporter behind the scene.
So what happened?
They wanted to take over the business, and they wanted to save that, and we have succeeded to save.
But you saved, but Sony is still a multinational, right? It's still not an Indian company.
Sony we have merged with each other. We are partners.
But they have the majority share.
They have majority, but doesn't matter.
Usually, you were very against multinationals. You wore your Indianness up your sleeves. But in this case,
Japanese are very different. They are like Indians.
So you have a problem with the Western world, and I think
I don't say Western world, particular individuals or particular kind of corporations.
Well, Subhash Chandra is saying Japanese are different. They are unlike the Westerners. We have more faith, and we are partner with Sony. That is now, some would say, a write-off. It's in the past. We don't know whether it's going to finally happen because officially that merger has been called off.
Right.
Does this now mean that the partners that Zee could be vying it would be a very short list, perhaps not comprising of any Westerners?
I mean, it depends, Shweta. You know, actually, when this conversation, the Duologue with Barun Das episode, when this got shot, we were sitting in December 2022. It had been 1 year since December 2021 when the merger talks and the negotiations and the deal closure was already halfway into its journey. Remember, the deal had to be closed by December 2023. So we are right in the middle when Subhash Chandra is actually speaking about his faith in Zee, his dependence on a Japanese company which comes with the same ethos, the same value systems, not different from Indian value systems, and where a handshake is supposed to be deal done. So I think this definitely right now, at least for Subhash Chandra personally, would feel like a breach of faith. It would feel like a trust broken. And to your specific question, I think, Subhash Chandra and the entire Zee family has fought and continues to fight many battles. Invesco was another chapter that he was referring to. It was hot news back in 2022 when Invesco was buying and was coming, in fact, in the way of this merger between Zee and Sony. Eventually, Invesco relented, sold a lot of its ownership in the company, and the merger went through. So I think that distrust, mistrust on Invesco is perhaps now at some level being mirrored on a potential distrust that Subhash Chandra would have even on Sony as a Japanese company, even though in 2022 he was obviously praising the merger and the partnership.
That also, in fact, raises questions on who could be a potential partner in the future. We don't know that, but looks like with Westerners out of picture, with Sony out of picture, there's very little room for any other partner.
But I think the question is, do we need a partner? I mean, you know, the entity commands 16% market share, ad revenues are taking. Is there not a possibility that Zee continues upwards and onwards on its journey without a third party, without another partner, without somebody really coming in?
All right, let me quickly take that question to Shri. Shri, does it look to you in the near future that Zee perhaps would not need a partner to continue? Because as far as the books are concerned, heavy losses on Zee's book at this point, you know, finding a partner was always better suited for Zee's fortunes. But in absence of any suitor in the near-term future, does it look like Zee will not have any option but to sustain the way it is at the moment?
Right. So one, Shweta, I'm not ruling out a scenario where Sony comes back to the deal, especially if the shareholders rally around and have the promoter family, ousted from the Zee board. That is number one. Number two, even from the family's perspective, the ideal desired situation would be one where they own 4% and continue to run the company. And the funds remain the significant shareholders. They are very quiet shareholders. They don't create too much of fuss or problems. So that would be a great situation for Subhash Chandra and family, that with a 4% ownership, they continue to run the company. And as Kartik said, Zee is a fundamentally strong company. It has very strong portfolios of channels, a strong portfolio of OTT platforms, a strong brand in the market. So when Subhash Chandra says that, ladki sundar ho to log aayenge, so there's no doubt he's one of the pioneers of media and entertainment in India. No doubt about it. I think where Mr. Chandra erred was in becoming too ambitious and getting into industries that were more capital intensive, and therefore the promoters had to pledge their shares to raise money, especially debt, to match the equity contribution.
Right.
So Zee is not a failure in that sense at all. I mean, as a business, it's a very strong business, which is exactly the reason why Sony's been patient for the last 2 years, was patient for 2 years, chatting with them. So I think Zee can continue as an independent business, even if this stalemate continues on who the majority owner will be of the company, Shweta.
Absolutely, you cannot write off Zee just as yet. Shri, thank you very much for that. But remember, in his duologue conversation with Barun Das Chandra, also unequivocally said that the family will in fact raise stake from 4% to 26% in Zee Entertainment in times to come. He, however, refused to answer whether the two A's, Adani or Ambani, had made a bid. Here's what he said.
Your shareholding has dropped from 41% plus to 4% in Zee.
We will again increase our stake to more than 25%.
Oh, really? What about the double A's? Have the Ambanis made a takeover bid of Zee Entertainment ever?
I will not like to comment.
You'll not like to comment.
Shri, before I close this conversation, do Zee and Subhash Chandra have the money to raise that stake? Does that dream looks like a dream in pipeline, or could it come to fruition anytime soon?
So Shweta, simple arithmetic. Sony had valued Zee at an enterprise valuation of about $5 billion. So 20% of $5 billion is $1 billion. That's 8,300 crore. I don't think Mr. Subhash Chandra at this point today has that sort of money to raise stake.
Okay.
I mean, if the family had, they would have probably gone ahead and raised it. The other thing, Shweta, we have to keep in mind is the SEBI investigation, which will probably get completed over the next 2 months on whether the family is responsible and what is the extent of fund diversion that has happened from Zee. So
Right.
these are all clouds that hang over the family, and it's going to determine what kind of a role they have to play in Zee going forward.
Absolutely, and you can listen into the entirety of that on News 9 Plus award-winning talk show Duologue with Barun Das on News 9 Plus app. You can download the app and subscribe to watch the full conversation with Subhash Chandra on Duologue with Barun Das. Thank you very much for watching.